I thought my family loved me until they needed my credit score. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Tess Marlowe. I'm 28 years old, and for the first time in my life, I thought I finally had things together. I'd worked my way out of student debt, rebuilt my credit after years of bad decisions, and landed a steady job at a small insurance firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me peace. I rented a cozy one-bedroom apartment, paid every bill on time, and promised myself I'd never rely on anyone again. Family had always been my anchor. My parents, Jack and Marianne, weren't perfect, but they were the kind of people who reminded me to call home, who sent leftovers after every visit. My younger brother, Cody, was the golden child, charming, a bit reckless, but always their favorite. I didn't mind. I was proud of him. I thought that's what love was, being there no matter what. One Sunday, they invited me over for dinner. It felt normal at first, Mom's roast chicken, Dad talking about football, Cody cracking jokes. But halfway through dessert, I noticed their smiles looked a little too forced, their words a little too careful. My dad cleared his throat and said things had been tight lately. I thought he was just venting. Everyone was struggling with bills these days. Then Cody leaned forward, asking casual questions that didn't feel casual at all. How much did I make it work? What kind of credit limit did I have? Was my credit score really that high now? I laughed it off, but something inside me tensed. He'd never cared about things like that before. After that dinner, they started calling me more often. My mom would drop by with groceries. My dad offered to fix my leaky sink. Cody texted me out of the blue just to check in. It should have made me happy, but it didn't. Their kindness felt heavy, like it came with a price tag I couldn't see yet. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying everything. The way Cody's voice softened when he said, "You're doing so well, Tess." The look my mom gave my dad when I mentioned saving for a car. The sudden warmth that didn't feel real. I told myself I was overthinking, that they just cared. But something about it didn't sit right. For the first time, I felt like an outsider in my own family, like they were rehearsing something behind my back. I brushed it off, but a quiet unease started growing in me, the kind that whispers before the storm hits. If only I'd listened to that feeling. I didn't know then that dinner wasn't just a family night. It was the start of the moment they'd stop being my family and start being my debt. A week after that uneasy family dinner, Tess sat at her kitchen table when her phone rang. It was her mother, voice sweet and careful, asking if she could come by that evening. Tess said yes, not thinking much of it. When her parents arrived, they brought Cody with them. They all smiled too much, the kind of smiles that made her chest tighten. Her dad asked if they could sit down for a quick family talk. Jack started by saying Cody had been working on something big. He said their boy had a real shot at turning his life around. Cody nodded, pretending to be humble, explaining he wanted to start a delivery business. He talked about routes, a used truck, contracts lined up, all the things that made it sound real. Tess listened, sipping her coffee, waiting for the part where she fit into this picture. Then her father sighed and said the bank wouldn't approve Cody's loan. They just need someone with strong credit to back him up, he said, looking right at her. The words landed like a punch. Tess stared at them, unsure she'd heard right. Cody leaned forward and said, "It's just for a little while. I'll handle everything." She shook her head immediately. She'd just repaired her credit after years of hard work. It wasn't just a number. It was proof she'd rebuilt her life. She said she couldn't risk it, not even for family. That's when the mood shifted. Her mom's smile faded, replaced by quiet disappointment. Jack leaned back and said softly, "We're not asking for much, Tess. Family helps family. You know how much we've done for you." The guilt hit hard. They reminded her of the times they'd helped her with rent, the meals they'd given her, the way Cody always looked up to her. Her mom even teared up, saying it would mean the world if Tess just believed in her brother the way they did. Tess wanted to say no again, but every word from them made her feel smaller. Over the next few days, they kept calling. Cody sent her texts saying things like, "You're my last hope," and, "You know I wouldn't let you down." Her parents stopped by unannounced, bringing dinner, acting warm but anxious. Every visit ended with another gentle reminder. Tess started losing sleep, torn between fear and obligation. One evening, her dad handed her a folder with the loan papers already filled out. He said she just needed to sign, that it was only $15,000 and Cody would pay it off before the year was over. He promised her credit wouldn't even be touched. Tess stared at the papers, feeling her throat tighten. She didn't believe him, not fully, but she couldn't stand the weight of their disappointment anymore. Her hand trembled as she signed. Her father smiled and thanked her like she'd done something noble. Cody hugged her and said, "You won't regret this." Tess forced a smile, but inside, something felt wrong, like she'd just signed away more than her name. 2 months passed before the first strange call came. Tess was at work when an unfamiliar number flashed on her phone. A polite woman introduced herself from the loan company and asked about the overdue payment for the delivery truck. Tess's stomach dropped. She said there must be a mistake. Cody was supposed to be handling everything. The woman apologized but said the account was already 30 days past due. Tess promised to reach Cody immediately. When she called, he answered on the second ring, his tone casual, like nothing was wrong. She asked about the missed payment. He laughed it off, saying it was just a mix-up, and that he'd fix it by the end of the week. Something about his voice sounded rehearsed. She wanted to believe him, so she said okay and hung up. The next week, another call came, then another. Each one firmer than the last, the balances growing, the interest creeping higher. She sent Cody text after text, no reply. When she finally caught him on the phone again, he sighed like she was the one bothering him. "It's temporary, Tess. Don't lose your mind over one late payment," he said. Then the line went dead. Days turned into weeks without a word. She called at night, early mornings, lunch breaks. Every call went straight to voicemail. Her messages started sounding desperate, even to herself. When she drove by his small rented office, it was locked up, windows dark, a for lease sign in the window. The truck he'd bought was nowhere in sight. Panic crawled up her throat. She called her parents, hoping they knew where he was. Her mother's voice came over the line, calm but distant. "He's figuring things out, Tess. You're stressing him. He doesn't need pressure from you right now." Her father echoed the same thing, tone sharp and impatient. "You're always so dramatic. Give him space." The words stung. It felt like the ground shifted under her. She wasn't the one who missed payments. She wasn't the one lying. Yet somehow, they made her feel like she was. Each conversation ended faster than the last. Her mother's texts turned short. Her father stopped calling altogether. At night, she'd stare at the stack of payment notices piling on her kitchen counter. Each envelope felt heavier than the one before. She imagined Cody out somewhere, living carelessly while she drowned in his debt. She wanted to drive to her parents' house and make them understand, but something told her it wouldn't matter. They had already chosen sides, and it wasn't hers. One afternoon, another call came from the loan company, the voice now colder, warning her about credit damage. She thanked the caller quietly, hung up, and sat in silence. The apartment around her felt smaller than ever. In that moment, she realized something she hadn't wanted to face. Her brother hadn't just disappeared, her family had too. 3 months passed, and everything Tess had built began to crumble piece by piece. The first sign came when she applied to renew her car loan. The bank clerk looked uncomfortable as she typed, then said the application couldn't be approved. Tess laughed nervously, thinking there had to be an error. But when she checked her credit report that night, her heart sank. Her score had fallen hundreds of points. Every missed payment from Cody's loan was sitting under her name like a stain she couldn't scrub away. She spent the next morning on the phone with creditors, her voice trembling as she tried to explain that she wasn't the one behind on payment. No one cared. The loan was hers on paper, and that was all that mattered. The collectors grew more aggressive, calling her office during work hours. Her co-workers started glancing at her with quiet pity when the calls came through. Her manager pulled her aside, reminding her that personal issues shouldn't interrupt company time. Shame burned through her. Her rent went up the same week. The landlord said her credit change made her a higher risk. Tess nodded, unable to argue. The walls of her apartment felt thinner every day, the air heavier. She tried calling Cody again, straight to voicemail. His phone had been disconnected. When she drove by his old office, the parking lot was empty, dust gathering where the truck used to be. Even the sign with his company name had been taken down. Desperation drove her to her parents' house. She knocked until her father opened the door, his face tightening when he saw her. "We weren't expecting you," he said flatly. She stepped inside anyway, voice shaking as she demanded to know where Cody was. Her mother appeared from the kitchen, eyes red, holding a tissue. After a long pause, her father sighed and said Cody had gone to another state to start over. Tess felt the floor drop beneath her. "He ran," she whispered. Her mother's tears fell harder. "He just needs time," she said softly. "He'll pay you back when things settle. He's your brother, Tess." The words hit like a slap. Her brother had destroyed her credit, vanished without a trace, and they still defended him. Tess looked from one parent to the other, searching for even a flicker of guilt. Her father avoided her eyes. Her mother's voice shook as she begged her to understand. In that moment, something in Tess broke, not from anger but from clarity. They didn't see her as their daughter anymore. She was a safety net they could throw their mistakes onto. She left without another word. Outside, the evening air was cold, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Everything she'd worked for was gone, and the people she'd trusted most had handed her the ruin themselves. Tess stopped answering their calls. Her parents' numbers flashed on her screen day after day until she finally blocked them. The silence that followed was heavy, but she couldn't take their excuses anymore. Every envelope that came through her mail slot carried another reminder of the mess she was drowning in. letters from banks, agencies, and collectors, each one colder than the last. Her name was everywhere, tied to debts she hadn't made. One morning, she tore open another envelope and froze. The balance was far higher than anything she'd seen before. Confused, she checked the details and her stomach twisted. It wasn't the same loan. This was new. Another account, larger, opened just a few weeks earlier. The documents listed her as the borrower, her signature neat and perfect at the bottom. But it wasn't her handwriting. She stared at the forged signature until her vision blurred. Cody. It had to be him. Her hands shook as she gathered every letter and drove straight to her parents' house. When she arrived, her father was sitting in the living room, calm as ever, watching television. Her mother looked up from her chair, startled by the sight of Tess storming in with a pile of papers. "Do you know about this?" Tess demanded, dropping the envelopes on the table. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. "He forged my name. Another loan." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but her father didn't flinch. He sighed and said, "He's just desperate, Tess. You have to stop taking everything so personally." "Personally?" Tess repeated, disbelief cutting through her voice. "He stole from me." Her mother stepped closer, pleading softly. "He didn't mean to hurt you. He's been struggling. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him?" Family sticks together. Something inside Tess snapped. "Family?" she said, laughing bitterly. "You mean the people who used me until there was nothing left?" Her father's expression hardened. "You're making this worse. He's your brother. You should be helping him, not turning against him over money." Money. That word shattered her. It wasn't about money. It was about being betrayed by the people she loved most. Tears stung her eyes, but her anger burned hotter than her pain. She looked at them one last time, realizing they weren't going to protect her. They never had. She turned and walked out without another word. The drive home blurred through tears. Once inside her apartment, she collapsed on the floor, clutching the papers to her chest, the weight of years of trust crushing her. For hours she cried until there was nothing left to cry out. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, her tears had dried. The fear and heartbreak were still there, but something else had taken root, a quiet, steady resolve. They'd taken her credit, her peace, and her faith in them, but they wouldn't take her future. She wiped her face, stared at the pile of debt notices, and whispered to herself, "I'll make this right and I'll do it my way." Tess spent the next morning at her kitchen table, surrounded by piles of papers, every page carrying her name and someone else's lies. She opened her laptop and searched for what to do when a family member commits financial fraud. The words looked unreal on the screen, but she read every line. By the time the sun went down, she had filled out her first police report. Her hands shook as she clicked submit, but she didn't stop there. She made copies of every document, highlighted every forged signature, and began building her case one page at a time. The next step was finding help. After several unanswered calls to local offices, she was referred to a legal advisor named Reed Donovan. He greeted her calmly, his voice steady, professional, without pity. Sitting across from him in his small office, Tess felt something she hadn't felt in months. Someone was actually listening. Reed studied the documents carefully, asked detailed questions, and told her she had a solid case. "It's not going to be easy, but we'll get through it." Days blurred into weeks as the process dragged on. She filled out forms, filed statements, and spent hours on the phone with agencies that treated her like a criminal instead of a victim. Reed kept her grounded, reminding her to breathe, to keep every receipt, every notice. When her parents were contacted for questioning, they didn't respond. Their silence was confirmation enough. She stopped expecting anything from them. At work, the situation grew worse. Her boss called her into the office, frowning as he mentioned financial instability. Someone had reported her credit issues to management, and they considered it a liability for her role in handling accounts. She felt her throat tighten as he talked about termination. But Reed intervened, sending letters that cited employee protection law. It bought her time and her job. Still, she could feel the stares, the whispers from coworkers who didn't know the full story. The months crawled by. She lived quietly, avoiding calls, keeping her world small. Little by little, she began to see progress. The police investigation moved forward. A few fraudulent accounts were officially closed. Her credit started to recover, slowly but visibly. Each small win felt like a breath of air after being underwater too long. Some nights, the silence in her apartment felt unbearable. Other nights, it felt like peace. She no longer waited for messages from her parents. She no longer checked if Cody had resurfaced. Her world was smaller now, but it was hers again. One evening, after organizing a final stack of cleared documents, Tess sat at her desk and stared at the folder labeled Resolve. It wasn't over yet, but she could finally see the edge of the storm. A faint smile crossed her face as she whispered to herself, "They thought they could ruin me with debt. They didn't know they'd just bought my freedom." It was late afternoon when Reed called her into his office. His tone was steady, but there was something in his eyes that made Tess's stomach tighten. He slid a folder across the desk toward her. Inside were copies of loan documents she hadn't seen before, pages filled with the same forged details, but this time, something new stood out. At the bottom of one page were two familiar names, written clearly side by side. Jack and Marion Marlowe, her parents. Tess stared at the signatures, her pulse hammering in her ears. Reed explained quietly that the bank records confirmed it. Her parents had co-signed one of Cody's fraudulent loans. They hadn't just known, they had helped make it possible. For a moment, Tess couldn't speak. It felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. All the questions that had haunted her, why they defended him, why they'd gone silent, suddenly had an answer. She leaned back in the chair, numb. The people who had raised her, the ones who told her to trust family, had been part of the lie all along. It wasn't just Cody's betrayal anymore, it was theirs too. Reed waited, giving her space to breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but hollow. So it was all of them, she said quietly. Reed nodded once. That night, Tess sat at her kitchen table again, staring at the folder of evidence. Anger rose, but it didn't come with shouting or tears this time. It came with clarity. If they were willing to destroy her for their own comfort, she was done protecting. The next morning, she filed formal charges against all three of them. Word spread fast in her small town. Family friends started calling, not to ask what had happened, but to shame her. You can't take your parents to court, one said. They're family, another added, their voices full of judgment. She stopped answering the phone altogether. Every accusation made her stronger. She wasn't doing this out of revenge anymore. She was doing it to end the cycle. When the court date arrived, Tess walked into the courtroom with Reed by her side. Her parents sat across the room, older, smaller somehow. Cody wasn't there. The judge called for order, and the lawyers began presenting evidence. Tess sat still, hands folded, her face unreadable. Then came the moment Reed placed the documents on the screen for everyone to see. The signatures glowed under the projector light. Jack and Marion Marlowe, undeniable proof of their involvement. Gasps rippled through the room. Her parents didn't look up. Tess felt her heart pounding, but her voice stayed even when she finally spoke. Every word was measured, steady, final. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else. By the time she left the courtroom, the air outside felt cleaner. For the first time, the truth wasn't buried under guilt or fear. It was out in the open, and it was theirs to face, not hers. The verdict came quietly, without any dramatic outburst or applause. Tess stood beside Reed as the judge announced the decision in her favor. The words felt distant, almost unreal. After everything, the sleepless nights, the accusations, the fear, she had finally won. The court ruled that she was the victim of fraud and identity theft. Cody was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen funds, and her parents were held responsible for their part in the forged loan. It should have felt like victory, but all Tess felt was a deep, hollow ache. Outside the courthouse, cameras and reporters waited, but she walked past them without a word. Reed placed a hand on her shoulder, told her she'd done the right thing, and offered a quiet smile. She nodded, too drained to answer. The people who had been her family were now just names in legal documents. Weeks went by before the next wave hit. Cody vanished again. He ignored every court summons, skipped town without paying a cent. A warrant was issued, but no one knew where he'd gone. Tess didn't bother to ask. She was done searching for people who didn't want to be found. Her parents' situation unfolded slowly, one notice at a time. Their house went on the market after the bank seized it for unpaid legal fees. Friends who once defended them turned away when the truth reached the neighborhood. Tess saw a short article about the foreclosure in the local paper. She read it twice, then folded it neatly and threw it in the trash. There was no joy in it, only closure. Then the messages began. First, a voicemail from her mother, voice trembling. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "We thought you'd be okay." Tess listened once and deleted it. The next day, another message came. Her father this time, trying to sound strong, insisting they'd just made a mistake. Then came letters, written in shaky handwriting, each one filled with apologies and excuses that all sounded the same. One envelope stood out. Inside was a single sheet, nothing more than one line written in her mother's familiar cursive. "We only did it because we thought you'd be okay." Tess read it again and again, the words cutting deeper each time. It was supposed to be comfort, but it felt like confirmation that they had never seen her as a person, only as something to lean on. She held the note for a long time before folding it once and placing it in the trash beside the rest. Her phone buzzed again that night with another voicemail, but she didn't listen. She deleted it like the others. Then she sat on her couch, the room quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't hurt. It was peace, cold, clean, and final. 2 years moved quietly, one steady day after another. The chaos had faded, leaving space for something Tess hadn't felt in years: calm. She'd sold her old apartment and bought a small townhouse on the edge of town. The place wasn't fancy, but it was hers, every wall paid for with her own hands and choices. Her credit was clean again, her records cleared, her name no longer tied to lies. When she opened her mailbox now, she found bills with her real signature, not someone else's. That alone felt like freedom. Reed still checked in often. What began as legal support had grown into an honest partnership. Together, they built a small nonprofit that helped victims of financial fraud, people who had been tricked or betrayed by those closest to them. Tess handled the personal side, talking to those who couldn't stop blaming themselves. Reed took care of the legal groundwork. They worked well together, balanced in rhythm and trust, a friendship anchored in respect rather than sympathy. Her days became simple: morning coffee, work at the office, quiet evenings with books instead of court documents. She kept her world small and intentional. Sometimes she'd catch herself waiting for her phone to ring, expecting one of the old numbers, but it never came. And eventually, she stopped expecting it altogether. The silence turned soft instead of sharp. One afternoon, she sat at her desk sorting mail for the organization when a folded newspaper caught her eye. A volunteer had left it beside the coffee pot. She picked it up absent-mindedly, flipping through local news until a familiar name stopped her. Cody Marlowe, 31, arrested on multiple counts of identity theft. She stared at the words for a long moment. The article was short, just a few paragraphs. It mentioned the arrest, pending charges, and a possible prison sentence. There was even a photo: Cody, older now, unshaven, eyes hollow. Tess studied it without emotion. There was no satisfaction, no rush of victory, just a quiet certainty that the story had ended exactly as it should have. She folded the paper neatly and placed it in the recycling bin. Then she went back to her work, reviewing a new case file for a woman whose brother had taken out loans in her name. Tess read the file with care, writing notes in the margin, thinking about what she wished someone had said to her back then. As evening settled in, she turned off the office lights and locked the door. The street outside glowed gold in the fading sun. She walked home slowly, breathing in the cool air. There was no bitterness left, only stillness. The past was behind her now, sealed, filed, done. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to look back. She'd rebuilt not just her credit, but herself. The evening was quiet when the envelope arrived. It lay at the bottom of her mailbox, pale against the stack of bills and flyers. Tess almost ignored it until she noticed there was no return address, only her name written in her father's neat, familiar handwriting. Her chest tightened. She hadn't seen that script in years. For a moment, she just stood there, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. Inside her townhouse, she set the envelope on the table and stared at it under the warm light. Part of her wanted to throw it away unopened, to keep her peace untouched. But curiosity, something softer than anger, something she couldn't name, made her sit down and tear it open carefully. A folded check slipped out first. She looked at the number printed on it, $15,000. Her breath caught. Beneath it was a single piece of paper, her father's handwriting again, small and deliberate: "For what we took. We're sorry. Take care of yourself." Tess held the note for a long time, the words blurring at the edges. There was no address, no signature, no way to answer. It wasn't enough to fix anything, and maybe it wasn't meant to. It was an apology wrapped in guilt, years too late. She turned the check over in her hands, feeling its weight. It could have paid off debts once. It could have meant survival back then, but now it meant nothing. She stood and walked to the window, the sky outside washed in silver light. The ocean wasn't far. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat, tucked the envelope into her pocket, and stepped out into the night. The streets were empty, her footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. When she reached the shore, the wind carried the smell of salt and cold water. Waves rolled in and retreated, patient and endless. She pulled the check from the envelope, held it between her fingers, and let the paper flap in the breeze. For a moment, she thought about everything that number had cost her: trust, family, years of her life spent cleaning up a mess she hadn't made. Then she tore the check neatly down the middle, then again, until the pieces fluttered like pale feathers. One by one, she let them go, watching as they scattered over the dark water and disappeared. The note followed, caught by the wind, carried toward the waves. She stood there until the last bit of paper was gone, the tide swallowing every trace. The sound of the ocean filled the silence around her, steady and calm. Tess turned away at last, the night air cool against her face. She walked home slowly, her hands empty but her heart lighter than it had been in years. As the waves faded behind her, one thought lingered, simple and final: they taught me the price of love, and I finally stopped paying. Hey besties. Thanks for staying with me till the end of this story. Can you imagine working hard to fix your life, only for your own family to destroy it with your credit score? Tess lost everything but still rose stronger, proving peace is the best revenge. If this hit you hard, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one. Bye!